being with someone that you trusted and loved so deeply, someone that you really could see yourself being with in the whole future, could change their whole life, became as a complete insane stalker creeper. I know that this happens a lot of people around the world, and I had never even in my life before until this happened. I never even imagined this gonna happen to me, but it sure did, and it really creeped my life out entirely. My name is Victoria, and all this happened when I was just 24 years old and lasted for 2 years, and I'm currently 32 years old and I am married, just mentioned. This is gonna be a quite a long story, so I'm only going to input some of the most important details that I still remember, and I'll tell you that it is a quite of a roller coaster ride. I'm mentioning that now. At the time, I was 24 years old, like I mentioned. I was living in Oregon, but I'm not going to give you a precise city because just for the privacy. Anyways, at the time, I just had finished college and I had moved back home and I have my own apartment and I was working at retail. And one day, I was actually approached by a guy from at my work, and I immediately recognized him. It was Noah. Noah and I went to the same high school, and I ended up seeing him since I went to college. We started talking, and he eventually asked me out, and I said yes. And I mean, I kind of had to admit he was a really good looking guy. I mean, he was well fit, brown hair, and all that. And we started dating, and even though he never actually moved into my place, so I moved into his, but anyways, we did a lot of things. We started dating for about almost a year and a half. After a year and a half, I started to find out some things about his past that I wasn't even aware of. But somehow he would manage to keep this a quite a good secret. It took me 1 year and a half to find out about it. That shocking news is that he was actually in a gang. Not only that, he was the leader of this gang. He was doing and selling drugs to other people in town. I was shocked about it. When I asked him about it, he didn't even deny that he was actually in it with this gang. In fact, even before I even came back home for college, he actually had been taking care of some other gangs in the area and stabilized himself as the main producer of certain drugs like meth, cocaine, and other things. And he even had some of his old friends from high school, some of his close friends like William and James. I mean, they were really good guys. I have known them as well. I mean, even during this time, he never actually brought any drugs to my house or to my apartment, which I have very somehow, even to this day, much appreciated that he didn't do. But when I went to his place, he'd always made sure to keep his drugs in keep saving or even have his put in storage where he have his gang to put it away or something. But he also made sure never to have any drug deals at his apartment when I was there, because he didn't want me to see his supposed operation of selling drugs. I asked him at one point how he never got caught. He was always being cautious about doing um, drug dealings around in alleyways or even in a park near where it's dark enough, or far away from any big crowds. He even had some of his own crew members who've been dealing the drugs themselves, and even had from time to time selling drugs at his apartment. I was horrified. and I didn't know what exactly to do. I mean, I should have just left them by then, but I didn't. And you know what was actually happened? One time when I was actually in the park with Noah, we were just sitting at the bench where this guy walked up to him and asked if he could have some of his drugs. And that was actually one of his most common buyers, of what he would say it. And when Noah saw this guy asking him for to buy some meth in public, there were at least a few other people around in the area, and also especially I was there. He had made one rule to every one of his buyers not approach him when he was in some public place like a park, if there is especially a few people around, and especially when I was nearby or even near him, because he didn't want me to be in any form of trouble or anything. So Noah, he stood up, pushed the guy on the ground, and yelled at him how I dare, how he dared even came out to him demanding to buy drugs. And he then grabbed the guy by his shirt collar and almost in a whisper, even though I don't know what he said, but something like, I do believe he said something like, if I catch you ever near me with my girlfriend around me, or in such public place, you won't see the next sunrise. And this guy then took off, and ever since then, no other buyers ever came after him. But some of his other gang members actually came after him and told him about some deals that had gone well, how much they earned, and I never even asked him about this because first I would not want to be involved in any of this. But one time he even asked me if I wanted to try some of the meth or some of the cocaine that he had at his home. I immediately refused. I mean, I was working at retail and I didn't want to do any such things at all. I know that meth and cocaine is a very addictive to it. And even though he tried to convince me at least a few times, but I said no all the time. But eventually he moved on from that. But eventually, when I was with him, the only thing that actually made me to leave, it was because I was with him and we were outside his apartment building when this guy, he was twitching and asked him if he could buy some cocaine from him. And even though that Noah tried to convey telling this guy not to do this, but this guy didn't care. He said loudly, I want to buy some of your cocaine, dude. Please. I need some of it. And what happened? Noah literally grabbed this guy by his shirt and punched him right in his face. I guess maybe 10 times. And this guy was so bloody mess. And he then told him to leave, and he also said, you will not get any drugs from me or on any of my gang ever again. That was the word of main rules apparently. And ever since then, that evening, I went home and I told my parents all about this because before then I hadn't even told any of my family or friends about his supposed secret operation of drugs. My parents was horrified. They tried to ask me if I had sold anything or if I even tried them. I said no. They know well enough I was not that stupid. So I told my parents that I'm just going to leave town for a long while. So luckily though, I had one of my dad's old cars that was still working. I took it, took one of um, my own clothes and some money, and I went to the payphone in town. Yeah, I know payphones probably not much of them anymore, but I called Noah, and he answered, and he was like, "Hey babe, are you coming over?" I told him that I'm not coming over, and we're done. And after all this, he tried to act calmly, but I know for sure that he was pissed. And despite all this, I told him I'm not gonna be back because his drug business is doing it's too much. And I would never want to even to be with him at all. Before he even could say anything, I hung up and just drove off. And at first, I didn't know where to go. But luckily, though, I drove all the way to Ohio because I had some relatives that lived in Ohio. And my parents had already called my relatives there to inform them that I was on my way. And especially my dad had given them some brief backstory, exactly what happened and why the reason I was coming over. And they were all welcomed me to stay there for as long as I wanted. And even so, I wasn't really sure exactly to be saying um, how to proceed with all this. I mean, my relatives, they were happy to see me, and when I arrived, I was a crying mess. I mean, during the last few miles to the place, I've been crying. I was worried that eventually Noah was going to track me down, but he didn't. Ever since I left my own home, I was devastated that I was like literally forced to leave my own place, my own home, my own family behind. But my dad were always been there to protect my mom and himself. And well, I mean, my dad is a bulky man. Like he's like a bodybuilder. He's like a bear of size of man, and he is not a person that you don't want to mess around with. He would not have been hesitating to punch Noah out of existence. And in fact, my dad did tell me Noah did show up a couple of times to demand to talk to me. But my parents told me, especially my dad told him, that I was not living there anymore. When he demanded to know where I was located, they refused. He demanded to know, and he even took a threat that he would, if he were not able to see me or even talk to me, he would burn down the house literally to the ground with them inside. Well, let's see. My dad had actually, at the time, had his cameras on board outside, which he didn't see them, and he said, "You don't want to do that because I can tell the police if you're being the threat." And my dad said that with a very angry tone, quite serious, in fact. So, and for some reason, Noah took that quite serious, and he didn't even return. My dad is the only one of the few people in the town that actually Noah, for some reason, feared. Even though my dad is like a big teddy bear, but he wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone that wanted to protect me, my mom, well, anyone that he knows. Ever since then, I decided to start working a new life in this new town. With the help of my relatives, I did manage to get a job in retail again, which I had no problem with. And it was around the time, after a few months, I was actually promoted to manager. I was proud of myself. And around the time, I was actually met this guy named Lucas. He was this very handsome young guy. He was only about a year older than me. He we started talking, and we were just friends at the time when we started talking. But then he asked me out, but I was really curious, but also hesitating at first. I mean, considering what my last boyfriend did, while still doing drugs and selling that, I didn't know if he was even that. But I gave him a chance. And I told him about my ex, his behavior, all. And Lucas was shocked. And I asked him if he even done anything like it. And he said, "No, why in the world would I even want to ruin my life to be any such poison?" Yeah, drugs are poison, people. Just saying that. So, but after a while, we started actually became official girlfriend and boyfriend, and we were just happy. Even though I wish I could just go back home to introduce my family to Lucas. But I know for sure that Noah had his gang members scattered across town, and if anyone else saw me back in town, they will immediately inform him, and he will find me at my parents' house, and that was one thing I didn't want to do. But the good thing is, for FaceTime, I introduced my parents to Lucas during a FaceTime, and it was probably the best thing, but I promised them that we will be back in town just to meet them in person. In person. But then, around the same year where we first started meeting, around early 2018, we actually decided to get married. For some reason, even though we hadn't even been together for even a year, but I felt safe. And I should say this, Lucas, he was not hesitating to use his weapon. You see, he was actually a Marine, and he had the license to carry unconcealed weapon. So, well, let's say we got married, even though my family, they were actually in at the wedding event. At least my mom came. My dad decided to stay home because he had to work, but he told me to have a good time. Though we did celebrate it to have the recording, and we went to a small cabin by the lake as a honeymoon. I didn't care if I was in Hawaii or France or Paris or like that. But anyways, around a year later, in the summer of 2019, we decided to go back to see my family for the first time in over a while, 2 or 3 years, something like that. It has been a while. But it wasn't just two of us. There were three of us. We actually had a young daughter by the name Alexandra. Alexandra was the most beautiful daughter I ever even have. She's my angel. When we came to my family's home, they were ecstatic. Even though some other friends showed up. But I already knew that it wouldn't be a matter long before Noah found out that I was back in town. And I was right. Because when he came back, he saw that one of his, I would say, minions told him that he saw me with a man and a baby, and he was furious. And when he came to my parents' home that evening, the first day he demanded I go back with him. But I told him I'm married, and he said that he will quote unquote, take care of that, meaning he will take care of Lucas as a permanent end. But what he didn't know, Lucas heard this and he didn't even hesitate to use anything. But was one thing I was really much concerned with my infant daughter's life. But I mentioned that I have a daughter, but he said, at least I can be her new dad, and we will raise her together. At least he had a decent enough of respect for not hurting children. That was at least on the most of his code, of his so-called code of honor. He wouldn't kill any children or elderly. That was his code of honor, which I kind of respect. I mean, if he had said anything that he didn't care if I have a daughter, I would be so upset by that. But I told him, there's nothing I would want to do. I left him years ago, and I would not want to do it to him anymore. Closed the door on his face, and he just walked off. The rest of a few days, I did saw that a car was following me around, but it's just myself in my own car, and I knew it was one of his minions. It was either William or James or someone else. Sometimes I saw both James and William in one car, and maybe just one of them or someone else. They started stalking me around in town, run from one place to another. We were staying in town for about a week, and they followed us around. But when I had Lucas with me, they stayed a little a distant from me. When they saw I had my daughter with me, same thing, because they had been given orders apparently, at least I think, at least that not to hurt me with my infant daughter. So at least my ex and his minions had to follow the same code of honor, the same rules, not to hurt any other one that's a children, because they're innocent. But it went too crazy one night. My parents was out for dinner night or date night. It was just me, Lucas. My grandmother was actually decided to look after Alexandra that night, and good thing too, because I have no idea what else would happen. Well, long story short, me and Lucas were sitting in the living room just watching a movie when we heard this loud banging on the door. I was like, who could that be? And it was like around 10:30 p.m. I was like, who could it be? So I went at the door, and who sure it wasn't, and but who else wasn't than other than Noah. He demanded now even louder that I would go with him or he was just going to kill Lucas in front of me. But I told him no and closed the door and locked it. I heard him yelling to William and James to get ready for a shootout. I told Lucas, but I didn't even have to because he heard that. He immediately went to my room, grabbed his weapon, and he told me to get into my bed in the bedroom, hide, call for police immediately. And I did. I could heard from my room that Lucas told them to just leave or the police will get him. But they all laughed and said the police was never going to catch them because they won't be enough fast enough. So he once again tried to make them to leave, but they refused. And suddenly I heard this pop, 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 and bang, 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 all over, and I knew what happened. James, William, Noah started shooting at the house, and I was terrified that Lucas was hit. But it was silent, and then suddenly fire from my end of the house. Lucas wasn't hit. But as they was doing this, I heard the doors broke in, and some yelling and screaming, and a lot more shootings. And then suddenly I heard a lot of yelling, and suddenly it all ended. I was hesitating at first to go there back in there, but I told the dispatcher what's happening. There was silence. She informed me to stay behind where I am safe because there was much else I could have done otherwise. But it didn't take long for the police to arrive. And long story short, when they arrived, they found the door just being kicked in, and they found one body dead on the floor, and they didn't know exactly who it was, but they came to me and told me that the all was over, and they need me to identify the person on the floor if I knew the person, and I did. It was Noah. Noah was dead right after he was shot by Lucas. Lucas informed them who he was, and he had a permit to be. He was my husband, and he had the license to carry his own unconcealed weapon, but he had to put it down. And what about James and William, though? Well, they were also shot. They were, but they were at least shot in the legs, and they were such much pain for them that they couldn't even stand up. But the police took them both to the hospital for treatment and later ended up in for jail for quite a long time because they were not only arrested for the break and entry, they were also for illegal carrying a weapon. They were not even licensed to carrying any weapons, and they even found the car, and let's say they found tons of weed and other drugs that they found, and that gave them a long sentence. And that was also meant the end of Noah's drug empire, which he called it, because shortly afterwards, all the other members was arrested. I was at least now safe and didn't have to be living um, in constant fear that Noah would show up. And even after he was being declared dead and then removed, his parents actually came to see me on a couple of days after this all happened at my parents' house. I was expecting them to be quite furious at me, but they weren't. In fact, they were apologetic to me, and they said sorry they had no idea their son had been singing so low. They knew about his doing drugs, but apparently he threatened them to kill them if they even revealed them his operations to the police or anyone. But now he's dead. They don't have to live in such constant fear anymore. And I told them that I don't feel any angry towards them because they were completely innocent. If they had known about his behavior even years before and I was still dating him, I don't know how they would even reacted, or if they had even believed me. Because it turned out they found out about his drug operation only about a year or two, 1 or 2 years earlier. And, well, let's say, now that he's gone off my life and basically off this earth, Noah, I know that we never want to see you, I would never see you again. And a good thing too, because you put me in such horror, terrified life for quite a long time. But for Lucas, he was my true hero, and if I don't know how, if I had lost him, I don't know what else to do. But at least he saved me and Alexander's life that night. Still happy with him. So yeah, this is my story how I survived as crazy drug addict, drug lord. Thank you.